my screen. It's got the little logo up in the top left-hand corner saying it's recording.
Okay, we are now being recorded.
Just to reiterate, if anybody doesn't want to be recorded, please leave the call now. Sorry, Ian, go for it. You said you had something else.
Submodules. We should talk about submodules a little bit, and specifically what the user's intent is when they do something on a file and the submodule is present.
Sure. I've added it to any other business. Good time to start now, from your perspective?
Yep.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the last call, I think, of 2018. I don't know that it makes too much sense to have a call in a couple of weeks' time. I don't think there were any specific issues to pick up from last call, so we will kick off straight away with Rebecca's going to give us a bit of a walkthrough. Rebecca, if that's a good time now to walk through the LSP side of things, just to sort of give a bit of an overview and bring everybody up to speed with where we are, because I've seen one or two comments from people offering help, so it might just be a good idea to sort of give a bit of a steer on where we are and how other people can help if that's what you're looking for at this time.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, let me just present. I don't know if it's useful for me to present, but I can just present. I was going to just go through like the code, I guess, and just to show people how the project's laid out. But yeah, I can start off. Am I presenting? Maybe. Okay, wait, here we go. All right. Yeah, so now I am. Hopefully. Okay, so basically, I'm just gonna go through and give an overview of like what we're doing for the LSP project and how what the status of it is right now. Basically, if this is like kind of for the perspective of someone who wants to contribute to it. Right now, it's not like a lot of us who are working on it are testing it and like using it, but it's definitely like very rough. So I wouldn't say it's like usable if you're like looking to use it instead of like the Go language server from SourceGraph or like just the regular VS Code tools. I think it's probably better to stick with like what the more stable stuff for now. Though I have seen a few issues filed, so I'm assuming that some people are using it, in which case it's up to you, but it doesn't have Go imports in there yet, so it's super annoying. And yeah, so current state of it is that we have like support for some of the basic functionality. So if you can see here, we have, maybe I'll make my screen a little bigger. So basically most of the code is in this tools internal LSP folder, and eventually we might make it into like libraries and things like that, but for now it's all internal, so we're not going to export anything yet. And basically the features that we have like basic support for are completion, diagnostics, formatting, and then some additional like type definitions, hovering, which is very basic right now, signature help, which is just like, just kind of similar to completion, where it just shows you the function when you're typing the parameters. So yeah, we have some basic features, and they're all just kind of like, and so the packages that are in here right now are just, so the source package is where most of the logic actually is. So in here is where like you'll find the actual code that like completion can be pretty confusing, but basically this is all the, I'm not gonna go through it, but like this is all the code that does the completion. And then the completion that was in the outer package is just converting the results that we provide to fit the LSP protocol. So it's like there's not that much here. So if you are like looking at, you want to add some feature to completion or something like that, you would add it into the source package, and you could like work on stuff in here. And this package, we also have this cache package, which doesn't actually do anything yet. So we're in basically the main thing that we're working on right now is, or we're going to start working on, is making it fast and actually usable. So that's where the caching is going to come in. So we're eventually going to have like a design for caching, and we're going to start implementing that and getting that working, so it'll actually be fast and not like calling packages.load on every request. So basically this folder doesn't really contain anything yet, but it will soon. And then the protocol folder just contains like it's like super, you don't really need to go in here because it's basically like, let me find a good one, or like it's just like or that's not a good example, but like it's all the details, like the of LSP, like it has every function that you would need to like, you know, if you want to support another feature of LSP. So you want to hit admit. Then the person get in. Okay, cool. Sorry. Yeah, so that's like all the protocol details, which you wouldn't need to look in there. So yeah, basically that's kind of like the overview of what we're doing. We're happy to accept like pull requests or changes if you have something in particular that you want to work on, but also we are like pretty actively developing on this. So if you want to work on something specific, I would recommend like filing an issue for it. I've been filing some issues recently, like things that I've been noticing. And so yeah, if you want to work on something, like definitely like claim it before you do, because otherwise we might just be doing it on our own, because yeah, we're working pretty actively on it. And yeah, I think, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that there are a couple of things I've just mentioned. So that the protocol folder is almost a perfect conversion of the LSP docs. It's not even in a particularly Go style. It's really intended just to formalize what the doc says the protocol should be and nothing else. So yeah, you really don't want to go near it. The source directory, you can kind of think of it as a library version of Guru. And that's why it's separate. It is intended to possibly become a library that other tools can use too, not specific to the LSP. Yeah.
Yeah, so if we were to open, if we were to make anything not internal, it would be the source. I think everything else is pretty LSP specific. Oh, I guess one more thing to add is there's I think Paul had asked me about VS Code specific things. We're just starting with integration testing. So for the purposes of testing specifically, we're using using this basically minimal VS Code extension that just runs a language server and does the basic connections between the two. So this is what we're using for testing it, but we're going to eventually add integration tests here, and ideally we'll add them for other editors as well. And that'll be the kind of connection points between the editors, just to make sure we don't break any major editors. But yeah, that's about it.
That's fantastic, thanks. So just to summarize, you are happy for people to start snooping around the code and contributing to the actual core LSP implementation itself, and where we're currently looking, that's the place that people should start looking. Do you want people to coordinate via golang-tools, or what's your preferred way of people saying, oh, hey, I'm interested in doing X, Y, Z? I think Marlon sort of asked a question that's kind of related to that. Is there a place where people can see what's being worked on, or do you want to just get people to say, I'd like to work on X, and message via golang-tools and do some sort of coordination there?
I think either messaging us, or I think ideally filing an issue if there's something that you notice that should be worked on. I think for now, we're probably only going to take contributions, I think, to the source directory, probably, because we still have to there's still a lot of key parts that need to be designed, and so we're not ready to have people contribute to the caching layer, I assume. But yeah, if you notice the kind of issues that I've been filing are typically if I notice oh, I would expect these completions here, but I don't see them. I would file that issue, and then you could assign yourself, or just either just add assign it to me or something, and then just say oh, this is an issue I found, I'd want to work on it. I think that might be the easiest way.
It might be just quickly worth showing some of the test data too.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the most valuable contributions would be tests.
That's a good point.
I was going to say, because Rebecca, really, it's entirely your prerogative as to what you would like the advice to be. I guess we can summarize that and just tweak it slightly in the notes from this session, just so that we can point and maybe even put it on the wiki page, just so that people have a good reference as to, I'd like to do X, Y, Z, what should I do? And then it just saves you answering that same question over and over again. And actually we can, as Ian suggested, just get useful contributions straight off the bat with minimal effort, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so yeah, absolutely welcoming contributions. But yeah, testing is definitely, actually, if you notice anything that's not tested, here's an example, I think. Basically, we're using the Go packages test framework for testing. So it's there's a kind of a format for the files. So if you see here, this is a test for completions. And basically, we like if you look, I guess here's an example. Like so, this is a test for completions and for type definitions. So like the completion would get triggered at the V, so like right at this position, and then you would expect to get value as a result. And then the type definition of like the variable sfoo, you would expect to get the struct foo, and so and basically we have to like it's just kind of it's a little bit confusing, but I think if you like read the test data, it's like it should be fairly obvious. But yeah, this is kind of the way that we're testing. And so if you notice anything that's wrong and you want to contribute like a test and a fix or something, that'd be perfect.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Just to ask a slightly different question, I mean, that's you've covered really people potentially contributing to the LSP itself or test data or something sort of intrinsic to the LSP at least. What about folks who are potentially considering writing editor plugins akin to the VS Code type plugin? Now, VS Code, Atom, I think have some sort of native support, if I can call it that, for LSP integration, but there will be other editors that don't. Is there, again, is that sort of like a coordination, probably more via golang-tools to sort of discuss that and coordinate amongst other folks who might be interested in doing that sort of thing, with perhaps getting input from you on that side of things?
Yeah, I think definitely for the editor stuff, we could just talk on golang-tools because I know like for VS Code, you don't really have to do anything. It's like they're out of the box, but if there's like another editor that needs something, then yeah, we can absolutely discuss that. That's probably a more involved thing than just like a bug or whatever. So, yeah.
Selfishly, I was thinking about Vim there, but thank you.
I had a little question from someone that really doesn't know about LSP stuff at all. How much does it rely on like a shared file system between the client and the server? So when you ask for a definition, does it rely on the fact that all the source is on disk, or do you like push up the source to the server and then it acts on that?
So the way that we're doing it right now is that like we're getting the contents of the files, and like we're basically using the packages API. So like it's looking at everything on disk except for like the files that have just been like changed. Ideally, we're gonna like do more work with like caching files and like keeping them and like dealing with how they change and stuff like that. Because like right now we're doing it most in like naive fashion where if a file changes, we get like the notification for that. But yeah, LSP basically has like various calls. Like if you open a file, if you close a file, if you change a file, you like get a notification for that. And so you can like handle that however you want. And so we're just using the packages API underneath all that.
So kind of if you edited a file, it wouldn't work on the changes that are currently in buffer, for example.
It partly would, yes.
Partly.
So the LSP pushes the edit across the boundary, and then we shove that into the overlays. So it'll be exactly as good as the overlay support is in Go packages right now.
Oh, cool. Right. The other, because I was vaguely thinking about, for large projects, you might want to have the LSP running on a more powerful machine or something. It was an idea that vaguely occurred to me, but I don't know whether that's even possible at all. But when requests are taking quite a long time to process, maybe that's a possibility.
Yeah, it's definitely it's something we do inside Google, so it's on our list of potential use cases to support.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I have a question that might be related more to Go packages. You mentioned that the LSP works on, modified files, and so like not yet saved files. Do you have a workaround for packages or files that have a new import but not yet saved, or is this still an issue with Go packages?
Files that have a new import but are not yet saved. New imports, we handle them now. So if you have a file that adds an import that wasn't there when you did a Go list, we will do another Go list and grab that import. And even if you add the new work that we did recently for overlays is even if you add a file that hasn't been saved, if it's in a package that already exists and is not a test file, important, then we will add that file and its imports into the overlay, into that package.
Interesting. Okay.
So yes.
Oh, great. So like if you have a new import and you haven't saved the file yet, everything should work fine. That's awesome to know. I have a related issue that I'll post on the chat that's been open. Just
okay.
a comment there. Thank you.
I think the general point, overlays are getting better, and the intention is to support everything it's feasible to support with overlays in the future. So just kind of, we plan to just trust them and keep making them better rather than try and work around them.
That's great. And Ian, Michael, that kind of sort of preempted my next question. Is this somewhere that's a summary of, or people can be directed to understand what the current support for overlays is? Are the Go packages docs reflecting that, or what's a good way to get that?
If the Go packages docs are not reflecting that, they will by the end of today.
That's the correct answer. Amazing. Thank you. That's great. And I guess if there's anything else, we can just chuck it into a wiki or whatever that just needs sort of slightly more rapid updating than going through change cycle. But if the docs can be updated, I guess that keeps people as current as possible.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else with any questions to Rebecca? Amazing. Rebecca, thank you very much indeed. And we'll try and get those, I'll request your help in just sort of getting those notes tidied up a bit so people just get pointed in the right directions to everything, so as to be as helpful as possible.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
Great. Thank you very much. Should we quickly skip on to just through the regular items? I don't know whether we've got Ramya, Zach, Joe, or Billy on the call for any updates from the editor perspective. Didn't see any of them actually on the call. So maybe we'll just skip over that one for today. I don't think, other than there being an offer of help, Ian, on the Go rename side of things, specific updates, maybe just a bit of a status update on where we are with Go imports. I've seen a few changes flying backwards and forwards on the Go import side of things. What's the latest on that?
So Go imports, we came to the conclusion that the way Go imports was written was causing us problems, and we decided that we should basically fundamentally change Go imports. So Heshi's been doing that. The nice thing about the new approach is that it lets us merge module support directly into the main line of Go imports. So Heshi's fork is no longer needed. The normal Go imports will switch into using Go packages if you're in modules. There's been a couple of small issues with it because it's such a different system, but it's also going to be more flexible in the future because we've changed it to a system that involves passes. So it does a pass to collect possible solutions to missing imports, and then if the pass kind of makes the file okay, then it stops, and if it doesn't, then it tries another pass looking in more places. And this kind of sequence keeps going on and allows us to stop as soon as we can, so that it's as fast as possible, but it also allows us to fall down to the lowest thing. And it also means that if you have a special source inside your company, you can add like a last pass that will look in places that the normal Go tools can't see, for instance. But it also makes a lot of things more regular. There's a lot less special cases. And also we made some other changes at the same time, things like any import that isn't named the same as the base name of the import, we always put the import alias in now, rather than, because it used to be that if the internal name of the package didn't match the import path, we didn't put anything in the file to indicate that, which made it very, very hard to work on source files because you couldn't tell whether a global symbol would come from an import or not. Now you can, because we always write the alias in. We're not changing the language or anything, so you can't necessarily make that assumption. Although in Go imports we kind of do, because we assume that if you're running Go imports, you probably ran Go imports before, and we can trust the imports are laid out the way Go imports would have laid them out for the most part. But yeah, so all of that means that Go imports no longer need to fork, and full module support will be in the main line very, very soon. On a similar note, I took a similar approach to fixing GoDef, so GoDef can be merged into the main line, so that also won't need my fork as soon as Roger clicks the submit button. So that means the only remaining tool that forked. Hello, Roger. The only remaining tool that's forked is GoCode. All other forks are no longer needed.
That's absolutely epic. So we'll see those CLs land, as you said, shortly, and the GoDef stuff being merged back into Roger's original repo on GitHub. Presumably, Heshi will just destroy his fork as and when that happens in order that people...
Well, we'll probably leave it up because we have to wait for VS Code to stop using the forks, or there not to be anybody still using it, or, you know... We'll probably put a note on them saying stop using this, and then I'll ask Ramya to switch back to the main.
That sort of would be akin to me requesting another force push again, which would not go down so well. Okay. I think actually sort of on the related to that, Roger, was there anything you wanted to mention about a proposal that you made, maybe not on the whole import path and package name thing? Just an FYI, maybe.
Well, it's just like if anyone wants to weigh in, I did propose that what Go imports is now proposed to do actually becomes a rule, so that if something isn't if you import something and the name doesn't match, then the language would actually require you to do that, and that would actually mean that when you're parsing it, you don't have to fall back to actually pulling in the packages. You can know by looking at the source code that that what symbols are actually come from externally or not, which seems to be relatively uncontroversial from the comments on the proposal. But if anyone wants to weigh in on that, I'll just try and find the issue.
I can certainly link that in the notes as well.
Yeah, I'll paste a link in the chat here.
Great, Ian. Thanks so much. And on the Go rename side of things, just to quickly touch on that I suspect is something that we'll start to see a bit more noise from. You talked last time about the sort of the complexities of that to reverse transitive dependencies. Is there there's perhaps not such a shortcut we can take with that one as far as Go rename?
Yeah, everything we do at the moment is go list all and get the full details for every package that's reachable, and that's a very, very, very expensive operation. But once you've done that, the rest of Go rename is pretty trivial.
Is that something that would essentially, I don't know, again, how susceptible, I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, how susceptible that is to caching, and therefore whether in an LSP world that actually becomes, we can amortize that cost by actually running such a query in the background?
Yes, writing something like Go rename inside the LSP is much more viable. There's still the danger of going from I just looked at this file and things it depends on to suddenly I need to see the whole world, and then your machine falls over because you've loaded every package in a 12,000 package repository because you're crazy people like Google where everything's in one repository. So yeah, there's dangers where you end up breaking people with very large repositories. So we're going to have to be
on the Go rename. Sorry, I beg your pardon, Karen.
I'm just saying that I think we will need some interesting hooks for collecting reverse dependencies, and the first implementation of that may be a Go list all that works it out from knowing everything, but that's not a sufficient solution for everyone.
Okay, cool. So it's still a holding pattern on the Go rename side of things, but as far as GoDef, Go imports, Go code, that all sounds like great progress on that side of things. Cool.
I'll just also mention that issue also proposes getting rid of dot imports, which maybe make some people happy and some people unhappy. So,
great for that. Cool. Anybody else got any questions for Ian? No. Cool. Michael, anything to say on the Go package side of things beyond what we said earlier?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing that's happened is the overlay support. Another thing that we've been thinking about is somehow propagating type sizes for people who want to run the type checker themselves. And like we made a super hacky internal package that will only be visible to the tools repo for now because we don't know what it should look like. But if there is anyone who has a brighter idea than we do, please let us know. So yeah, and that's mainly there to support that for now. But we assume other people will want to do their own tech checking too. So
cool. If you want to link to that code or whatever included in the notes, please just ping over something into the ping me something, because I don't actually see in the recordings. I can't actually see the message history. I don't know whether there's some way I can do, but I'll try and grab a copy of it before I drop off if you paste it in there.
On for the message history for this call.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. But otherwise, I'll just try and chase people down for any links they may have posted in afterwards.
Sounds good. I'll just ping it.
Anybody any questions for Michael? I think we touched on the whole overlay thing earlier on, but please just jump in if there's anything else. Nope. Alan, Ian, anything on the Go analysis side of things you want to update on?
There are no updates on Go analysis other than, yeah, I mean, we have longer term plans to do more work on analysis, including like integrating it with the LSP, but for now, the last 2 weeks, yeah.
Cool, and the vet stuff remains exactly as per Alan's last update, that for 1.12, the vet will use a vendored copy of the analysis package.
Yes.
Yeah. Just to give everyone an update, because I don't think we've mentioned it, Alan has moved on to better things and passed on ownership of analysis to the rest of the team. So we're both excited for his new journey and sad that he's no longer with us.
That sounded awfully macabre.
To be clear, Alan is still alive.
That was like corporate speak, is what it sounded like.
Yeah, he's just doing something else for a while. I'm still half convinced he'll come back.
Good. Hopefully it wasn't these calls that put him off. Goodness me.
Yeah.
Thanks for the update, Michael. Send our best wishes to him, given that he's still alive. Fantastic. Brian, Jay, moving on, Command Go and any sort of related to those things.
Let's see. So Jay's been looking into Go list and a kind of nexus of bugs around that and fixing some other bugs. I've been kind of hammering on a bunch of different stuff. There are now release notes in golang.org/doc/go1.12. Look for release notes there for anything notable that's going to make the release. We've had some questions about what the status of modules is for 1.12. The status is that the behavior of Go 1.11 module is the same as it was in 1.11. I hope to change that in 1.13. Module mode outside of a module continues to improve. I think Jay submitted a fix for a couple of things earlier, and I've got another one in the pipeline. I think that's about it. I think there was one go.sum issue remaining that I really want to take care of for 1.12, and anything else, if it's not in now, it might not make the cut. So just to set expectations. I think we've moved milestones over. There's still some bugs that we're looking at, and if stuff has small enough fixes to make the cut, then the small fixes will make the cut. But we are being mindful of the 1.12 freeze. That's
awesome. Jay, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I've been digging into some profiling and tracing of GoList in particular, mostly just trying to get a feel for how long different operations take and what we're spending a lot of time in. I've seen GoList as surprisingly user space CPU intensive. I expected us to be spending most of our time in like system calls and I/O, but we spend a huge amount of time just like parsing files and building up metadata. So I think there's some optimization potential there. It especially appears that we're pretty linear, and we can probably parallelize that a bit. I'm working on a CL that Russ handed over to me, which is to cache the package metadata in the main build cache, keyed by all of the like file stat metadata. So that would let us basically stat files, make sure that the inode information hasn't changed, and then look up their metadata without actually reading the content of the files. So basically checking things like M time and size haven't changed. So that seems very promising, especially if we can load up the whole package structure, and especially if we can avoid the go/build context.import, which we do a lot and spend a huge amount of time in right now. By the way, the issue that you posted last time about the difference in macOS Docker and native performance, just basic file system operations in macOS Docker are way faster. Like outside of GoList, just like the basic read and stat calls, way faster in Docker. I'm not really sure about Docker internals, but it appears that they're running like a virtual Linux system under a hypervisor. And so it's basically going through a Linux kernel, which has very, very low overhead on stat. Like each stat call takes like 1 to 2 microseconds, just surprisingly fast. But the native macOS will be a bit slower because of that, and Windows will be considerably slower just because of system call overhead. So I think we'll focus on trying to do as few system calls as we can.
Okay.
But there is just going to be some overhead on those operating systems.
That's great. And just a quick question going back to the directory metadata caching is, dare I ask the question, is that a 112 thing?
I'm hoping it will be in 112.
That's amazing. Brian, just to quickly jump back, there was one significant issue that you closed, which was replace directives satisfying a require, which is one of the most requested things, I think. So just to note that got fixed as well. So thank you.
Yeah, so that one's fixed. It'll generate a horrible looking pseudo version for you. That will be the signal when you see that pseudo version with a whole bunch of zeros in it. That will be your signal to fill that in with a real version.
Fantastic. Just before I open the questions up to everybody else, there is one 1.11 issue that we sort of went backwards and forwards on, Brian, and that was the backporting of the relaxing within 1.11 of the Go version verb in a go.mod file that Ian Lance Taylor worked on. Is that going to make it into the 1.11.3 release tomorrow? If not, that feels like something that needs to land at the same time, if not before, the 1.12 release candidate?
It will be in a 1.11 release. It will be 2-point releases off of whatever was current last week, because the first point release is going to be security patches, and the second release will be everything else.
Okay, got it. Will that sort of be concurrent with the 1.12 release candidate, or what's the ordering of those two?
The 1.12 beta, I believe, will be after the 1.10 and 1.11 patch releases. Okay,
that's perfect. Okay, because I think that's probably feels like the right order on those things, just from having run into that, and Roger runs into it a bit more. As soon as people start using 1.12, they're going to start hitting that issue more prevalently.
Yeah, killed a Go workshop for me nicely the other day. When at the repos I pointed everyone out, none of them worked with Go 1.11 because they all had Go 1.12, and I was like, ouch.
Cool. Anybody? Sorry, I'd rather hog the call there. Anybody else got any questions for Brian and Jay?
There are a few questions posted on the chat.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I've missed those.
No worries.
Maybe Daniel, we can take your call, take your question offline on that one. Here's a link for the site. Thanks, Michael, for that link there. That feature, is it Ian? I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. If you were referring to what my question there, I will post a link to that issue right now.
I just did.
Oh, thank you very much, Rod. Great. So there's no other questions on that. Brian, Jay, thank you very much indeed. LSP updates would be the next one, but Rebecca, I think we covered that earlier on. So does anybody else have anything? We can just sort of skip into any other business now, unless anybody has got any questions that they want to bring up before we crack into that. Otherwise, Ian, did you want to start on the submodules point?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things to do with submodules that came up in issues. And really, I just wanted to ask people to start thinking about what they thought the intent would be. So the questions are things like, if you have an editor where you open your repository and then you open a file in a submodule of that repository, how are tools supposed to do anything with that file? So if we set the current workspace to the folder that you opened, which is the outer repository, and the outer repository depends on the sub-repository, it does not depend on the file that you just opened. It depends on a version of that file in the module cache. If you open that file and try and do anything with a file equals query, the only answer Go packages can sensibly give you at the moment is there is no package that contains this file, because there is no package that is reachable from the current working directory that does contain that file. So how are we supposed to work out what the intent of the user is under these circumstances?
These feel like conundrums, Ian. That
they are conundrums. they are questions to which I have no answers, which is why I'm asking everybody here to think about it and tell me what they think the answer should be.
I mean, I think you want to let the user know that they probably intended to have a replace directive that they don't have.
Well, we can't sensibly tell them that. They just hit go to definition on a file that they opened. That we don't have.
Does LSP not give you a way to suggest an error toast to the editor or something?
We kind of can,
or something.
But at what point? When they open the file? It's not unreasonable to open a file. We can't immediately tell them that their Go mod file is wrong because they opened a file. So do you know what I mean? It's really hard to find the right scene to even suggest something useful to them. There's also, if they open a file from the module cache, then if the file is reachable from their current workspace, should we behave differently to if it's not?
Yeah, really good questions. I thought quite a lot about this when doing GoHack and ended up with something quite naive, but it's really awkward issues.
Yeah, I think there are some. I think submodules in general have a lot of really awkward issues that the community as a whole needs to really think about.
So can I just ask a quick clarifying question? Is this specific to submodules, or is it a problem just generic to a dependency? Because whenever, and this may just be limited to the situations that I've looked at these issues, it doesn't, to my mind, matter that something is a submodule, just that it is a dependency. And sort of akin to Roger's point there about GoHack, is you're looking to jump to something, whether it's in another repository or not is neither here nor there, or maybe that's not the case in this situation.
So the difference is with submodules, you're likely to have opened a folder. Browsing to that folder is a completely reasonable thing to do in pretty much every IDE experience there is. Mm-hmm. And yet the contents of that folder are not part of your current workspace. Mm-hmm. It's a discrepancy between the concept of a folder and the concept of a workspace that causes the problems, because it's impossible for a user to even realize that this has happened to them. Without having the IDE hide folders that contain go.mod files in the IDE, it's a very confusing experience. And if we did that, whereas if it's a dependency that's somewhere else, it's normally much more obvious to the user that either they don't have a replace directive to go to this completely different place that's outside their folder, or it to somewhere else because it was correctly depended on. Either of which is less confusing.
Because this brings us back to the still unanswered question of context in Vim. We had a solution. I say solution in VS Code Atom, where, as you say, it's the repository or whatever. But it's sort of feeling like if there is a more concrete definition of what is a main module, i.e., this is the thing that is my project, if you like, and this is the main module, then you can potentially achieve what you're talking about there, of that hiding of things that just happen to be within the same repository directory structure because they're irrelevant to all intents and purposes. This is my main module here.
Yeah.
I don't know how unnatural that is, though. Having worked with, to my mind, with modules, I only consider things as being the main module because that's what the go.mod operates on. And everything else is, like submodules or another dependency, are just an irrelevance. But that's I don't use VS Code, and so I don't have this visual tree that I have open, which, as you say, is perhaps a very, very common thing for everybody else.
Yeah, I think that's the key is that the theoretical concepts are one thing, but the practical experience of the user is completely different to that and very hard to explain to them.
What do you think is the best way of getting a bit of feedback? What do you want in terms of feedback on this? Is it something that we keep?
I guess what I want is for people to tell me what they would expect. Because if everybody agrees that they expect a certain thing, then we can just do that. But if everybody disagrees, then that's a very interesting thing to start talking about. Do submodules work correctly? Do we need to change something, the messaging, the tools, something? Because nobody's expectations match and we're going to confuse everyone. Like, I'd like to know just that. Like, if you did something, what would you expect to happen? And then we can see.
And that question might be nuanced somewhat by what editor somebody is using, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Is it worth?
We may well find that all VS Code users would expect one thing and all Vim users would expect something completely different, and that would be an interesting finding.
Is it worth maybe sort of raising an issue a la Rust style, then having comments in the issue that represent the various options as far as answers are concerned? People can, something like that. I'm just wondering, that might be a way of collating all the various options and also having people, dare I say, vote on them as to what's the most natural to them.
Yeah, and I will probably start that process, but I'd also ask the people that attend this call to think about, what other scenarios can be added to the list of things we'll ask people about, because I've come up with all of them.
Well, maybe if we start an issue, a thread in golang-tools, people can contribute to that, and then we can distill an issue out of that or something. I'll include a note in the notes in any case.
There's one thing that occurs to me, and is that might feed into this, is the possibility that is in the Go issue of having a separate file separate to go.mod that has extra replace statements and that sort of thing, because that would make it possible, for example, when you load up a module with submodules, to automatically add replace statements that direct to the submodules within that module. So that without actually changing the go.mod file, so as a sort of temporary editor space type thing. I don't know if that's something one would actually want to do, but it's something that might be worth thinking about.
It's definitely something I want to do. I already suggested that as well. I think making changes to go.mod that shouldn't be submitted is a very dangerous path to go down. I think we need a file where you can make local replace changes that you are never going to submit.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think that having any kind of file-based replace in go.mod maybe shouldn't be allowed at all, in fact.
Exactly. But yeah, if we had such a file, then yeah, maybe part of the solution would be to have VS Code write lots of replace directories into it for you as part of your workflow, or GoHack can do the same and that kind of thing.
Well, GoHack would certainly use it, yeah.
Roger, are you thinking about Ian as well? Are you thinking about that go.mod.local issue?
Yes, essentially that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just sort of mentally referencing that for because I think there are other reasons that issue is interesting as well. So if this is something that adds a bit of weight to that, then worth noting. Ian, anything else you wanted to add to that? Otherwise, I think we can certainly follow up on golang-tools afterwards.
Yeah,
and anything else that you need from us.
Thank you.
Cool. Actually, sorry, just flicking through the any other business, so please just interrupt if there's anything anybody hasn't sent across to me. Ian George, apologies if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. This was just a discussion now a few weeks back on the Slack channel, sort of related to a conversation we've had before about module package and pattern preferences. I think there's a thread actually, we can just pick up again on golang-tools on that topic, and the preferences there being, for example, just as a quick refresher, you've got a repository which is exclusively, for example, WebAssembly based work, which needs your goose and gorch to be set to a specific thing. And if everybody who's working on that project ends up having to manually within their editor, for example, set goose and gorch because it's a WebAssembly project, that becomes a bit of an overhead. Maybe there are packages that are specifically WebAssembly or whatever else. So that's the issue. Is it Ian? I'm sorry, am I pronouncing your name correctly? Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, it's Ian. So I'm the one who
Ian.
I brought this up a few weeks ago on the tools channel, and you invited me here. So that was one of the big issues I wanted to discuss, which is that I've run into the problem where I would like to kind of specify sort of like a Arch and OS sort of affinity, or sort of like preferred Arch and OS for a submodule, particularly for WebAssembly. And I think at the moment that's the only use case I can think of it for. So I'm looking at the code now, and the way the context is packed, I see like it either first attempts to look at the environment, and then it pulls the local runtime to pack the Arch and OS in the build context. And so what I was thinking is maybe something in the middle there, where if the GoArch or Goose environment isn't set, maybe you could look in the local mod file for a hint.
So you're looking in the Go packages side of things here, or whereabouts are you looking? Or Go build? Is that the package you're looking at?
Well, so right now I'm looking at Go build, and so again, my idea or my thought was that maybe as part of the build process, we could specify a preferred Arch and OS in the actual mod file, and so a WebAssembly package might have might be a submodule that specifies like a preferred preferred Arch and OS. Does that make sense? Or
yeah, no, it does. Because this has actually come up before, so I just wanted to, Ian, I don't think we actually took this sort of got left to the side when we last talked about it. Has there been any further discussion on your side?
Not really, but I did think about it a bit, and I'm not sure you actually need to do anything with modules. I was wondering if what we could do is have some kind of standardized way of kind of indicating in a file or a package a preferred goose and arch, maybe by just having files with built and something that kind of goes, hey, I like me, and then you could run an analysis tool that kind of propagates up and says, everything currently reachable would prefer WebAssembly, and then VS Code could run that tool and say, I'll suggest to the user that I should switch to WebAssembly mode. So it's a kind of combination of tooling rather than something that the Go tool itself does, which I think is too unwieldy and would lead to confusion. Instead, helpers that allow the editors to make the right choices might work better.
Oh, I see. So my issue is that I typically don't use an editor to build my code, and what I'd like to be able to do is effectively, just be able to run Go build and have it sort of have the Go tool choose my preferred Arch. And I realize it might be confusing, and so when I was trying to think of like a way to indicate the Arch in OS in the Go mod file, I wouldn't want to, I was trying to imagine something that made it clear that isn't typically the proper place to indicate that sort of thing, right? So instead of like preferred Arch and preferred OS, or I don't know, I can't.
Probably preferred.
What's that again?
Probably like a default rather than preferred. Like if it's not explicitly set in the environment, then
Right.
use this one instead of.
I was trying to think of something that even further kind of like dissuaded people from using this, right? Like, the same way that, you have like unsafe pointer or something like that. Like, it may be default in itself is also a little bit not misleading, but it's not unfriendly enough. But yeah, that's all.
So the reason I was thinking it's the Go command isn't quite the right place to do it is because there are too many weird edge cases where you depend on two packages which both set a different preferred, or you have lots of packages where they might prefer WebAssembly but they will compile for the other modes. And
oh sure,
but we do have like that.
Suddenly you add a trans dependency that you don't really know about by accident, and your Go build that used to build for host is suddenly building for WebAssembly, and you have no idea why or how to fix it. I think there are too many awkward edge cases, and it would hurt more people than it helps, which is why I was thinking like some stuff over the top that users could use if they choose, that it collects this information and allows them to work nicer, might be better than trying to do it directly inside Go build, say.
I think if we had something like this, it would probably only make sense to apply it in the main module, just like replace directives, right? So like whatever's set in the main module applies to any of your dependencies as well.
Okay, so again, the way it would work for me is if my WebAssembly stuff could be submodules of my sort of main sort of version module, and I agree that there's cases where this might be like or could be abused or could raise or could cause confusion. But I think right now probably the most likely case is that somebody has a mix, like whatever your default arch is and then some WebAssembly stuff. And so I don't think I don't see it as big of a problem as anyway.
It's definitely a subject that's worth continuing to discuss. I think we should keep going with the conversation, because I think usability is important, and I think the space of WebAssembly in particular is an interesting place that's going to grow in the future. So we should definitely keep thinking about it.
Cool. Is it worth thinking about, and if we want to actually kick off or just reignite the conversation in golang-tools, even though we could easily sort of think about what an experiment might look like in terms of, as Ian suggested, coming up with a preferences file or something like that, and seeing what that solution might look like and what changes would be required to various tools. I don't know how keen you are on sort of taking that forward and restarting the discussion.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to.
Yeah, cool. Because then I think that way we can sort of flesh it out in a tiny bit more detail and just see whether it sort of makes sense as a concept with all those edge cases that we're talking about. Because I think when we had the conversation before, there were talk about having preferences at a module level, at a package level. I'm just trying to think of whether the other package patterns level, all these different things. And I think it goes beyond just Goose and Gorch as well, but to also include build tags. And this is where, sort of back to Ian's point from earlier on, it sort of became more of a thing that it felt like editors would definitely want to use. And as Ian suggested, easily be understood between editors as well. So if I happen to open a package in Vim, and that's a command package, so main package, for example, it could load the same preferences as somebody who happens to also be editing it in VS Code as well. So that might just be the conversation to pick up, I think.
Okay.
Great. I appreciate. Thank you for joining the call and for fleshing that out in a bit more detail. We talked about Go rename earlier on as well. Ian, you touched on the next question with what's the plan for Guru in your LSP discussion.
Yeah.
Michael, thank you for the update on the overlay support and getting the docs updated on that. Just to reference, because we're getting close to time here, there was a good conversation in the Slack channel about pre and post conditions in code. I'll include a link to that. I find the conversation quite interesting as well. Ian, you were fairly fairly active in that conversation as well. And 2 other interesting tools that I will link from Iskander about consistency in terms of style in code and consistency in names as well, that I will link at the end of the notes, just for people to take a look at. That's all my any other business. Does anybody else have anything that they'd like to bring up?
A bit of a random question, which is just out of curiosity, is there any idea when modules is like getting out of the experimental flag, like any estimate or what release that might be?
I'm hoping it'll be 1.13. There is a specific list of like clusters of changes that I want to fix beforehand. The major constraint is that we would like it to be the case that when we default it to on, that modules created after that point continue to work with goTools built before that point. And there are a couple of minor semantic tweaks to specifically to vendoring and to replacements that will allow, I think that will allow more module configurations to build, but that means that tool chains from before that might not be capable of building them. So I want to get past that point with the semantics. I'm hoping that'll be 1.13. I can't promise anything, but I will be very disappointed if it's not 1.13.
Sounds good to me.
Thanks, Bowen. Otherwise, sounds like we're done, coming on to up to almost exactly the hour. Ian, anything else from your side?
No, I'm good. Thank you everyone for coming.
Yeah, thank you, and Happy New Year in advance.
Indeed.
Thanks, folks.